Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Glennis, Director of Programming at the Temple of Understanding, a global interfaith organization celebrating 65 years of promoting peace, human rights, and environmental justice through education and advocacy. Today's event is a part of our Eco Justice for All series, which highlights voices from around the world working at the intersection of climate, equity, and human dignity. I'm especially glad to be here with our summer intern cohort of 14 young leaders from 10 different countries. This session focuses on fast fashion, an industry built on exploitation and waste. Behind every cheap garment is a high cost to workers, the planet, and our future. Our speakers today are working to change that, reshaping fashion through justice, sustainability, and courage. We're grateful to be joined by Jerome Foster, White House Environmental Justice Advisor and a leading youth voice in the climate movement. Feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll get them during the Q&A. And now I'll turn it over to Jerome to introduce our panel. Jerome, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be the moderator for today's event about fast fashion and its intersection with faith and environmental justice. Today, we see that 10% of global carbon emissions come from the fashion industry, and there's immense inequality when it comes to labor rights, when it comes to impact to the environment. And this panel today will be introducing a panel of experts who are working at all different intersections across the world to tackle this issue. So I will pass it over to the various panelists, starting with Sofie, to introduce themselves and their work.
Thank you, Jerome, and thank you, Glennis, for inviting me to speak here. So for those who I haven't met before, I'm Sofie. I just graduated my master's from Parsons School of Design, and I'm originally from Sweden, but lived in Norway before I moved to New York. And just prompting what brought me into this work, how I sort of reminisce back from like Sofie as a little girl. I had big fashion dreams. So Project Runway, like imagine the big dream of like being the next star designer and then really like passionate going to fashion design and designing the next great thing. And then I remember we had a course in, I think it was like dyeing and processing, just for us to know like what fabric you choose and how it's made and things like that. And then I remember specifically that it was a section when you're like, okay, if you choose denim, you have to choose these toxic chemicals, and it's going to be this much water, and it's going to have these impacts, and then it's going to be these respiratory issues for whoever produces this fabric. And from there, it was like a pivotal moment where I'm like, this is not fun to me anymore. If I am to be a fashion designer and am going to sign off on all these things and terrible consequences for the people making the fabric that I then choose to design, it just didn't, it lost its luster in a way for me. And this was when I was, 19 years old, like this, and now I'm 28. So like it was a while ago. And then I moved into a bachelor in science and textile engineering, which is the science and understanding the supply chain of creating a fabric and creating products. And then after those 3 years, I moved into the actual industry, working in sustainability at, I don't know if we have any Scandinavians in the audience, but I was working for Johansson, the ski and sailing brand. And then I was trying to like tackle the sustainability issues there. And then I realized that there are deeper systemic organizational issues that you deal with when you're in a big corporation creating garments. And then I moved into my master's, which was strategic design and management. And strategic design and management acknowledges that there are many, many interconnected factors. And especially in the fashion space, I feel like our other panelists would go into this also, but the fashion industry is the first industrialized sector in the world. And I think you forget that. Like, it's the spinning jenny in the UK that like brought up our industrialization. And this is also an industry that is uniquely unregulated from environmental and human rights laws. So it comes with a lot of issues, which brought me into public advocacy in my master's. So I work now as a public affairs intern for New Standard Institute, and we work to progress and advance the New York Fashion Act. If you haven't heard about it, it's an incredible bill that is now introduced in 4 states in the US. And in that space, I also co-founded a student organization, which brings students such as me, but also like undergrad students, high schoolers, postdoc researchers, to advocate for a future that they want to see in this industry, because it's a new and evolving space of actually regulating the fashion industry. And because it's so um, spread and scattered across the world, it's really an evolving space of governments trying to intervene in an industry that has been self-regulated since, again, industrial revolution. So it's a hurdle, but I find it very, very purposeful. And the more you speak and connect with people, the less daunting it feels like, and the less alone you feel. So I think I will sort of close it off there, but I'm very happy to be here and look forward to the panel. And we'll hand it over to Jerome to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Sofie, for that. And I will pass it on to Katia to talk a little bit about her work.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Katia. I'm an environmental bioengineer, which just means that I believe that nature already has all the solutions to all of our problems. We just need to be asking the right questions. I'm currently working with the OR Foundation, a nonprofit based in Accra, Ghana, in West Africa, that in general is just trying to fight for a more just and circular fashion industry, but really we're centered around the phenomenon that is waste colonialism. So I can go more into the details of waste colonialism later, but basically it's just this loophole that the entire fast fashion industry has found to hide just how illogical and unsustainable this entire production model is. So, rather than having your consumers actually see the visible waste and how it's not going anywhere, you can just ship them to countries in the global south to deal with the burden of that. What brought me to this work? Honestly, I grew up in a tiny town in West Africa that nobody really knows anything about, but somehow at 17, I got into Harvard, and I guess in a way that comes with a pressure to make it all mean something, like somehow the universe aligned for me to be this one Ghanaian kid. And so like to get a peek at the curtain, it came with this responsibility to make sure I came back to do something with it, because, not everybody where I come from gets that opportunity. But admittedly, I did get a little lost for a while and ended up in commercial strategy consulting for a big pharma, which was not great, not really my vibe. And then one day I met this Mami Wata priestess in New Orleans. So basically, Mami Wata is this figure in West African pantheons that's just the personification of water. So she's definitely not for everyone because, like water, you can't really control her. So on some days, she could be this monstrous wave crashing into boats, but on other days, she could be a calm stream giving life to a forest. So just this idea that water is not something that is to be controlled, but just something that should be revered and taken care of and all of that. But yeah, at the time, I hadn't really realized how much of this fragile fast fashion model is dependent on cities like Accra and cities in Chile and Kenya and all over the global south actually collecting their waste. But long story short, after meeting this priestess and I guess maybe communing with the water through her, I found myself back in Ghana working to protect our water from the mountains and mountains. And when I say mountains, I'm not even exaggerating here. Mountains of textile waste scattered all over our wetlands and beaches just because the fashion industry is trying to hide that proof of waste and over consumerism and all of that. So maybe the water orchestrated my journey. I don't know, but just gonna pause my introduction here and pass it back over to Jerome.
Thank you. That's incredibly powerful to see, like, in your community, you're able to see the impacts of fashion and be able to speak to that so clearly. I can pass to Elise as well to speak to her work.
Hello, everyone. My name's Elise. I'm a master's student. I go to UC Santa Barbara. I'm studying environmental science and management, and I'm specifically focusing on the intersection of business and environmental policy. So I got interested in this work, similar to Sofie. I had big fashion dreams, not so much designer-wise, but I just love fashion. I love Styling is my primary form of self-expression. And I even wanted to go to fashion school when I was a kid. But then I realized that I don't want to be a stylist or a designer, so I couldn't really go. Um, but around the same time where I had that revelation, I was reconnecting with nature in high school. And I joined the environmental activism club at my school and just was learning more about environmental justice and environmental science in general. And I ran a community garden, and it was really impactful for me. And I decided to study it further in my undergrad. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I studied ecology and evolutionary biology. Um, and ecology is very synonymous with what is happening in the fashion industry, because I learned that there is so many interconnected parts in our ecosystem, and very little can have such a huge impact. Um, and us as humans are impacting our systems in a major way. Um, so it just kind of made me think about how I can apply this knowledge and my passions and make them collide. So when I graduated from undergrad, I started working for the state of California, um, and I worked in conserving endangered plant species because I specialized in plant sciences. Um, and that was fun for a little bit, but I just wanted to make a bit more of an impact. And I was always drawn back to fashion. And I, I mean, like many, I was a consumer of fast fashion, and I just had to really sit down and think about like how I want to move forward. If I'm this environmentalist, like how can I also ethically partake in something that has brought so much joy to me? And I started to learn a lot more about textile waste, and the effects of that, how it leaches into water, microplastics, greenhouse gas emissions, the list goes on. So I decided to go back to school at UC Santa Barbara. Um, and it's been really impactful learning about how to actually make change in this space. And I've found that it has to be either in policy or from the business side, trying to make the business case for implementing sustainability measures within a big corporation, or in this case, like a brand. Um, so we'll see how I end up applying my knowledge after I graduate next year, but I'm definitely leaning a bit more towards policy. But currently I'm getting some technical skills this summer. I'm in Copenhagen, and I'm with a consulting company doing greenhouse gas emissions and ESG reporting, just to see how all that works, because that's a bit, at least in the EU, they actually mandate that. So that's been nice to be around. So I guess ultimately I'm drawn to this work because fashion has always been a safe place for me, but it's become a very unsafe place for the environment. So anything I can do to help fight against this, help educate people on its effects, that's how I want to dedicate, that's what I want to dedicate my life to. Um, yeah, I'll just keep it there for now.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jimena.
Good morning or afternoon. I'm not sure if other people are tuning in from other parts of the world. So I'm Jimena. The J sounds like an H, but very, very easy to make that little error. I am currently based in Peru. So right now I'm in Lima, so that's the capital, but usually I live in the northern part of Peru in a region called Cajamarca in a little village called San Miguel. And my work right now is focused directly with artisans and the producers of clothes that we wear. So these artisans who I work with, they do textile work using a 5,000-year-old method called cayua weaving. So it's backstrap loom weaving, and it's pre-Incan, pre-Hispanic. So working on preserving that art with them, and also innovating their textiles so that they're more attractive to the modern market. So most of what they make are scarves or ponchos, and that's not really things that we normally wear in the Western world. So working on that textile innovation and that creative work, and also advocacy for artisans. I did not have a fashion background before this, so this is the first time that I'm stepping into this space, and I'm quite new. I've only been here for a year, but have learned a lot on the field from that time. And then intending to actually stay in this world of slow fashion afterwards. So yeah, quick introduction, but I think that's good to start with.
No, thank you so much, all of you, for the introduction to let the audience know about the work that you're doing across the world and throughout the industry. I wanted to connect your history and where you're coming from to understanding where you're doing work now within like how you hold space, how do you hold power accountable, how do you intersect your belief in belief systems and culture that rooted you in the work that you're doing now, and how do you translate that into systemic power? I know Sofie talked about the work through and also at least through policy and government change, and also with Katia of like just advancing the community and their need for having change implemented, and that comes from a belief that the world can be better. And I was wondering how do you all connect that, and how do you all see a theory of change that connects from where you believe the world can be, and how do you see that visualized through your work? This is open to anyone.
You mentioned my name, Jerome, so perhaps I will touch base on this first. So on power, like we explored this throughout Parsons. Like power was really like a central part of like everything we do. So we had all these methods to illuminate which actors hold power and how to communicate with them and sort of how to facilitate conflict management and envision something else. But it's such a struggle to go from like an angry advocate to clearly see that something is wrong to not rant, because no one listens when you're angry. Like that doesn't come to a shared understanding. So I think when we go to lobby days in Albany to advocate for the Fashion Act and speak to actual legislators like senators or assembly members or their staffers, you really practice that communication skill to really like speak to what they care about and what is in their interest. And I'm not saying that to sort of water the issue down, but it's basically like you wear a suit, sir. A suit needs fabric. Fabric is produced by people. Like it's really go down to the basics to then try to get common pinpoints of caring. I think that's a key that I've had in my sort of power narrative as I speak to people in this space, and even like new people that are not in the fashion space, to like, okay, but get people to care about the issues that are important, I guess, is what I think.
Yeah, I just will go off of that, Sofie. So I'm a part of the Next Gen Assembly with the Global Fashion Agenda. And it's basically a group of young professionals in sustainable fashion and very different backgrounds, and we're all from around the world. And we had the opportunity to go to the Global Fashion Summit this year. And we were able to have an actual roundtable with a bunch of different environmental professionals, either in corporate, NGO, nonprofit, and just basically talk to them about our views. Our theme this year is how can fashion value the rights of nature? And so we had a whole manifesto that we came up with together and we presented it to them. And one of the key takeaways from that experience was communication and being able to communicate these ideas to people that don't care as much, because everyone in the room, we pretty much were on the same page already. Like we were kind of preaching to the choir, like they were all working in sustainability. So they weren't necessarily learning anything new about the state of the fashion industry right now, but it was an interesting turn in conversation, just trying to brainstorm how we can get through to people that don't have the environment on the forefront of their mind, or it's not necessarily a part of their work. So yeah, when you're talking, Sofie, that's what that made me think of that. And I guess at the end of the day, it is like kind of boiling things down, meeting people where they are, trying to connect on I guess, a personal level, but we also talked about community, like local community work, just starting small with your own communities, whether it's like your coworkers, your friends, your peers, and just trying to relate to them on, you know, a base level that we all can understand, and then eventually like building up that knowledge of like why we need to take this seriously. Yeah, communication is key, and so having like an open mind on how to get through to people of different backgrounds is really important.
Yeah, I can go if that's okay. I guess for me, I'm realizing more and more the importance of telling the story, because I feel like you mentioned, the Industrial Revolution, the fashion industry did start somewhere, but as like capital got accumulated and our whole relationship with clothing just got messed up to the point where it no longer became something we made because we needed, but it became something we made because we could, and we could make it cheap. And so it's going to go somewhere when we're done with it. And, all of these systems like the secondhand trade and this idea that, you can always put the clothes in some bales and ship them to Africa because there's going to be poor kids who need them. But I guess just reframing the story so people actually understand that all of this, like the clothes, you're like the global south isn't being done a favor. First of all, when the clothes get here, it's a service that we're providing to the global north, managing the waste. But the idea that clothes are inherently harmless, one, but also the idea that this system is sustainable and isn't going to eventually collapse at some point is something that I feel like we should do justice to showing how illogical it is. Like, you can't just keep making an infinite number of clothes that aren't going to decompose and that are designed to have like be worn only once or twice, and then just have them go somewhere on the planet and hope that things figure themselves out. Like, that's not going to last forever, and at some point we're going to hit that tipping point and that bubble is going to burst. And I feel like that's where we're even heading. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but maybe that's where we're heading with the marketing trends, with Gen Z and all of this focus on like greenwashing and sustainability and all of that. But for me, I guess with regards to systemic change, like telling the story really is important, because for so long, the people who have all of the power have been telling the story a certain way. And that's why we haven't realized how much of our planet is collapsing because of these clothes. Like, even putting together like the climate change stuff, I mean, which is also very important. I'm not one to put aside climate change, but even the fact that like we don't even know like how much lead is going into our clothes, and this lead is going to go to the global south and going to go back into the waterways and the ecosystems and all of that. And it might be in a crop for now, but the ocean's all connected, and there's just so much that the fashion industry has gotten away with because for too long they have been allowed to tell the story a certain way. So for me, like, the very first step for any systemic change is really just getting that story right. Because if we just collect all this data, but we're not doing the work to transform it to a story, someone else will. And that story is not going to actually help the people at the bottom who haven't been given the chance to tell it. Yeah.
I'd love to bounce off of that. Thank you, Katia. Totally in agreement. And yes, I've been focusing a lot on storytelling this year because, like I mentioned, I do not have a fashion background, but for me, as what they call like an extranjera here, like a foreigner, I came into this place and I was like, why aren't people talking about this? Like, why aren't people talking about all the artisans who work in the mountains and are making these clothes? And why don't people connect the producer with the final product? But they're just like, oh, so pretty. Like, they'll see it at a Peruvian market in Cusco and be like, oh, this is so nice, but they don't know where it comes from. So I've really, really been trying to be the advocate for that storytelling, because a lot of times, and at least in this particular case that I'm living in, is that the artisans don't really have a voice, whether it be they don't know how to read and write or they don't speak English. So maybe they can't really send their message out to a wide audience, or they just don't know how, or they don't know that they can. So for me, I think Jerome had asked, like, where are we now and where could we be? Like, my dream is to see on the cover of Vogue not the model wearing the textile, but to see the artisan with the tools and with the raw materials. So yes, totally in agreement about the storytelling and how important it is. And also, I think it's important for me to share that, like, I don't think if I hadn't been storytelling, I don't think I would be in this role, because like, how would people find me and how would we connect our knowledge and all of those things? So that's just you know, a little bit of evidence to show that storytelling does make a difference, at least I can get this message out to you all.
That was incredibly powerful. I just want to summarize that by showing that like this is such an intersection with the work Katia and Jimena of global North countries sending waste to global South communities and saying it's a service, but then we see that it depresses so many of the already vibrant communities that would be able to send and create clothes for their own people, but because of the waste that's piling up in mountains, we see so much waste that becomes this a part of a larger problem. And a lot of it also comes down to the fact that our economy is, in a sense, in massive contradiction within itself, where we're seeing sustainability preached in massive ways, but then they are an opaque system that's completely unaccountable. And through this conversation, it's wondering, many in the audience are, how can I be a part of the resistance? How can we change these systems? How can we be a part of Katia's work in empowering people to say, hey, we want to say, no, we want to reject the waste that's being sent to them. We want to be a part of Jimena's, Jimena, I'm sorry, I'm messing up your name. But
Jimena. It's
Jimena,
okay.
okay.
Jimena,
Uh,
like an H.
Oh, Jimena. Okay, got you. And the work they're doing with artisans and how we empower them to do that. How can we find them? How can we support them and tell our neighbors about the work that you're doing? And Sofie and Elise, like it was so powerful to see that through your work you're talking about really getting away with the kind of cognitive dissonance that many politicians have in the US and how they just see like the suit that they wear as something that's not connected to that wider world, and it's rooted in a sense of white supremacy and this view that, oh, we have a society that exists outside of the bounds of the normal way things work. They don't see the person who worked to create that garment as a full human. They just see them as the worker and the work that they provide. And I think it's so powerful to see like, how do we tell those stories? How can we as audience members continue that work? So I wanted to ask that question. What does it look like to disrupt? What is the ideal world? What do you send a message to people that are watching this? What do you want them to do to carry on this movement?
I guess I have been harping on about storytelling for a while, but just to add on to that, one of the things we're pushing for as an organization is this concept of a globally accounted EPR model. So EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Basically, a lot of countries in the EU are already starting to pilot this and figure out what it looks like for them, but none of that is actually accounting for the fact that most of their waste doesn't stay in the EU. It ends up going to cities like Accra and others in the global south. So we just want to push for a system where when this waste crosses borders, it goes along with the money, with a tax. Because first of all, we feel like the story that all of this is a donation, that's a service being done to the global south, we're tired of that story. We want to emphasize that it is a service we are providing for the global north. And if cities like Accra stop collecting this fashion waste, the entire model, the entire production empire would collapse, because all of the consumers would now have to actually deal with the physical waste, and all of these countries that aren't dealing with it will now have to account for that in their economies. And by the way, no economy, even the most advanced economies, can deal with the waste at the rate at which is being produced. And well, the second thing is, well, with regards to storytelling, a big part of why they're able to do this is they've just warped all of our minds to the idea that clothes are something that are consumable. So I guess just changing our relationship with clothes to move it from this thing that you have and then use and then you're done with, but just buying clothes that you're going to keep for the rest of your life, and not allowing Nike to get away with this advertising that they can just sell you a new pair of sneakers every year. You don't need a new pair of sneakers every year, but somehow they've convinced us. And it doesn't need to be polyester. Polyester is just cheap to make. Like, there's so much value in valuable clothes that has just been thrown to the side because in the name of marketing and consumerism. So yeah, just on that point, but also there are ways to actually just support the markets directly. We work with a lot of amazing designers on the ground upcycling the clothes. We work with the largest secondhand market in the world, which has, which is specialized around upcycling all of this clothing waste into new, beautiful materials. We're also working with community cooperatives, like pulling tons and tons of waste from the ocean every week on the ground, like preventing it from getting to the wetlands, even going through the markets and collecting the waste and diverting them to other upcyclers and recyclers. So there's so many ways to invest directly on the ground. But one of the ways could just be buying from these designers. Like the internet has made it so wonderfully easy to just ship all of the stuff across the world. And if we tell Nike that, hey, we might want to buy this upcycled shirt from a market in Contamanta, maybe they would actually change their whole business model to allow for things like this and to account for the actual costs of taking care of waste into the price of the shirt. Like if a polyester shirt actually accounted for the amount of money it would cost to take care of it in Accra, you might be less likely to buy one every month. And yeah, so that's the model we're trying to push towards.
If I may go next after that, because I really resonate with EPR. And again, I'm from Sweden, and we are one of the countries that actually pilot EPR now. So it's mandatory separate sorting of textiles now. And it's in the news now, in Swedish news, of like thrift stores that are like, oh my God, it's so much textiles. What do we do? And then this comes in the public mind, and seeing real Swedes that are like, okay, this is too much volume. Like, what do we do? This is now in our borders. What do we do? And that is, I mean, my friends and family, they acknowledge that, like, oh, is this an issue now? And I'm like, it has been an issue forever. It's just that you haven't seen it. So I think that's powerful, because now the civic narrative sort of changes. So just a note on that, but I'd love to connect to you after on that, Katja. But for me, how the people in this audience can contribute to the change of work, really, like 1 out of 3 people like in Gen Z are addicted to fast fashion. Like that's an established fact. Like fast fashion is the cigarettes of the youth. Like it's grim, and we just need to be kind to ourselves, because the screen time is a real thing that makes us unhappy. So something that has been very good antidote per se is to actually show up in person for things that you care about. Like even Elise mentioned that she was at a community garden and did real life things. Like that's impactful. And like Jimena also, with like working with real artisans with real material that brings you from your screen. And even when we show up for lobby days, like we speak to, again, I'm Swedish, I'm an international path student. I still live in New York, which means I'm paying tax in New York, which means the legislators of New York, their work is to listen to me, to listen to my story, take my needs into account, and then act on that. But if I don't show up to Albany, if I don't make calls to lobbymakers in their states, people, like they don't know that I care about these things. They don't know that I clicked all these things on algorithms on Meta. Like that's not something that they have a direct and personal link to. So I'm connected to the Fashion Act and that work, but do a small research and see if there are any impactful laws in like waste or environmental protection or recycling or animals' rights. Like there are so many initiatives that you can volunteer and engage with, and go to meetings and talk to people that are in this work, because that changes things. Like we've brought in, again, high schoolers, undergrad students that have been their first day talking to lawmakers. And it's the energy of that space is just, you don't get that from online engagements. You need to like show up for that. So I really encourage people to do that, because it really changes the whole game of it all.
I mean, that specifically speaks to the next point of like many people now like know what they can do and like ways they can get involved. And I encourage you all to look up these panelists and their organizations and see if you can volunteer, spend any time, donate any money to support them as well. But what is your message to the fashion industry? How can we structurally change these things? I've heard conversations about co-ops and how we can introduce democracy in the workplace so we don't have a economy where they rather see the world burn and forests burn down for leather waste than see their profits marginally impacted by it. And what other structures have you seen that work best for accountability, more sustainability, inclusion that has been effective in your work, or you think would be effective worldwide?
I feel like some of the more notable companies that have been successful with sustainable fashion, they incorporate sustainability into their ethos from the beginning, like Patagonia or just other lifestyle brands that from day one they're they're considering the impact of the on the environment. So, you know, you say, what would you say to fashion brands right now? And I feel like they've kind of heard a lot of this already, and they still continue to not. So I think, I mean, this might be a bit pessimistic, but I feel like we kind of can't do too much with, oh my gosh, I'm like super freezing out. Stop. Oops. Okay, I'm back. I think, I mean, I know we've been talking a lot about policy, but I feel like there's not much we can say to, especially these huge brands that are contributing the most to the harsh effects of fast fashion, unless they're being forced to address it. And that's what like EPR bills are doing and advocacy work. So I guess like I would say consider what it takes to live, I guess, on this earth for long. I guess like boiling it down to like human level, like if we continue as we are, we will not have the materials that we have today, and we're gonna have to reframe our thinking to resilience rather than just consuming constantly. So I guess I would just try to get through to the humans running these businesses rather than the businesses, because the businesses will continue to be a business. Um, and just try to think about like your children, the generations after you, like they're going to have to deal with the effects of your work today. Um, and aside from that, then they just have to be forced to change with other measures like the Fashion Act, or in California, there's a new EPR bill, SB 707, Responsible Textile Recovery Act, that is about to be implemented. So we'll see how that goes. That's part of my thesis work. Yeah.
I think if nobody else wants to go, but I guess one thing I've learned from my like 5 minutes in the fashion industry is that there's just so much inertia when it comes to actually doing the work to do data research. Like they have so much data on marketing trends and consumer behavior, but nobody actually wants to do the data to figure out where their fabric is coming from, or who's making it, or how many they're making. And so one campaign that we did it was bigger during Black Friday. It's kind of died down a little more now, but we're still very active, is the Speaks Volume campaign, where we're just calling out brands specifically to just tell us their production volumes. So not even what they're putting in the clothes or like what kinds of clothes they're making, just how many clothes they're making. And most of the brands don't even have those numbers available. And I dare say it's intentional, because if they did have the numbers, that they would realize how ridiculous everything is. But even a simple question as easy as how many shirts do you make Nike, like Nike can't answer. And I feel like unless we actually poke enough holes and hold them accountable to the point where they have to be transparent with all of this data, we're not gonna go anywhere, because we don't even have the full scope of the problem. And yeah, that's my 2 cents after 5 minutes in the industry.
I don't want to speak too much, and I want to leave space for Jimena if you have a note, but just on the volumes, which is crazy, by the way. Um, the EU, yes, we have EPR laws, but no one is mandating how much you're producing, because when we talk about geopolitics, the political ideologies that are driven in EU are growth. And you don't talk about like overproduction, because that is encountering with like the ideology of constant growth. So just like going from like a product design view to like a bigger global view, that just, it's deeper, but it's good to be mindful of that, because I've lost my mind several times and I hopefully got it back. But something that's impactful about the California law is that they actually mandate clothing producers to report how many items they put on the market, which is impactful because then you get that data point at least. Like, it's not great or done, but it's at least, it opens the door to hopefully that's going to be shut open in coming few years. So yeah, but it's a crazy issue. I could rant about it forever.
No, I want to thank you for that because I did a lot of work from the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council over the past few years, and we've seen a lot of communities like in Cancer Alley and in the Texas Gulf Coast that have been impacted by like benzene and production of nylon and textiles, and seeing like it's caused cancer in so many communities. It's like it's caused so many illnesses by the fact that they just refuse to not have basic labor standards and basic respect for human life. And some of the call to actions that we've been seeing that have not been replicated through our recommendations on a national level, but we saw in 2024, California passed the EPR legislation. So their deadlines are due for 2028 for them to have their supply chains and those actions taking place. And just to really make sure that like on the national level, there's more like regulation around supply chain transparency and defining these terms that they're using, because they just put anything that says green on a label and they get free reign to market endlessly about how they're good for the planet. And there needs to be so much more accountability. And I urge anyone who's in there, state, local action, state level action, to call your member of Congress and say, hey, we need to follow California's lead and to put forward EPR law. And we've seen like in the decades prior, there was an EPA, the California led the charge as well by tracking tree equity score cover and exposure to extreme heat. And later on, national states started following that, and it saved lives. And it's like if we just see that when states are taking charge and are leading the way, there's a reason for that, because people who are concerned about this in California, there's also people concerned about it across the US. Yeah, I just want to make that statement, but I did want to turn to the audience for questions as well. I'm not sure how I see those questions, but that'd
Um,
be
So I have a bunch of interns lined up for questions, and we can just have them one by one, and I'll be away and they'll be in front of the screen now.
awesome.
Thank you very much for your talk, and thank you, Jerome, for facilitating it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good morning. I'm Orunav Chakraborty. I'm one of the summer intern for Temple of Understanding, and I'd like to thank you all for the wonderful discussion. I really felt connected with the method of storytelling and meeting lawmakers. But on that note, I have one question. It's like one of the key ways that like fast fashion manages to sell a lot of their products is because they have like crazy cheap prices, so that like even people who cannot like when they see those prices, they kind of like feel compelled to buy a lot, which in turn like creates a lot of waste, as you have all mentioned. So since the discussion of like meeting lawmakers, is there any economic instrument or model we can propose to the government on fast fashion products? For example, like maybe indirect taxes on like different kind of like products made by fast fashion, so that when the price is higher, like less consumers can buy it, and in turns like there's less quantity of waste. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that question. Anyone want to talk, Sofie?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think I can address that just through the New York Fashion Act, which is now scaled in other states. And regarding the price, I think it's important to say, even like with New York and California that are such big markets, for them to actually say, if you want to sell a garment in this state, you have to abide by these sustainability standards. If you don't do that, you don't have access to this market. Then you're fined, or you know, have public scrutiny that you don't abide by these laws. So the Fashion Act have anchored their work in Science-Based Target Initiative. And that's an established method. Many corporations do that already, and it's basically mandating that corporations set and achieve science-based targets. And they have a plan, and that they have staffers and basically set up a system for that whole thing. Now SBTI is under public scrutiny, but we'll perhaps expand on that later. But I think that's important because it is actors such as Shein and Temu that are the big fast fashion drivers. They're allowed, like their business model is thriving because there aren't any roadblocks for them to come into the market. So that's where I think public or like government intervention comes in and is impactful. But yeah, it's an important question. So thank you for asking it.
Hi, no worries. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I guess,
Oh,
I was
sorry.
gonna say on my end, I can talk more for the global south of it all. So for
Mhm.
us right now, there's no active EPR model that accounts really for the global part of it all. It seems to be more focused internally. So we're just trying to create a system where it's harder to exploit these systems where they can send the clothes to the global south. And part of that is not allowing them to externalize the cost to the global south. So like a big part of the reason a polyester top can cost $4 is because they're not accounting for how much it would cost to take care of it after its life. So if all of those costs were included in the final cost, then there would be less incentive to just keep buying and buying. So for us, globally accountable, specifically globally accountable EPR is the solution. And there's no EPR policy that doesn't include that is complete and sustainable from our point of view. Yeah.
I see. Just a small follow-up, like a very small question. So it's like us, like teenagers or like high schoolers or even like college students, how we can like directly and get involved with this kind of like processes, like in terms of like lobbying or in terms of like getting our message to the lawmakers directly.
So for like honestly, not a lot of regions or even states are going in that direction. California's EPR bill is pretty expansive. So is France's. I don't know about the general EU, but even like bringing it to your lawmakers' point of view at all, because like not a lot of people are talking about this, and a lot of the people making the EPR laws, it's not that they're excluding the global south. It's just not in their frame of reference or in their world. So just even bringing all of that to the limelight, to your policymakers at every level could be a step forward. I mean, any step is a great step. So yeah.
I see. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank you so much for your impressive career path and for having shared with us your story. So my name is Lara, I'm a master degree student from Italy, and I have two questions actually. So the first one is more broad. Could you please suggest some sustainable fashion brands that actually as consumers we can go there, and also, for example, like which prioritize the sustainability and social responsibility. And then the second one is more a little bit personal to one of you, so to Jimena. It's really probable that next year I will be in Peru, so I don't know if we can, I don't know, connect and yeah, stay in touch. Thank you.
Hi, Lara. Actually, I raised my hand because I had an answer to your first question, but I can also answer your second question. So one of my favorite brands, and I work with them pretty closely because they're actually, well, a little bit of background context. The brand itself is called Zazi Vintage, Z-A-Z-I, and I can put the link in the chat later. One of my favorite fashion brands, also like personally connected to their team. So they started about 10 years ago. And the way that Zazi started is that the founder, her name is Jeanne de Kroon, she's from the Netherlands. She went to India when she was 22, and she found this atelier of women in the villages of India who had a sewing machine and had saris. And her idea was like, why don't we make this into dresses, and why don't we sell this to people in Europe? And she started, I think, with 500 euros and 5 dresses. And now she has a massive company. And this year it had 500% growth. So that's just like a huge success story. Now she works with over 1,000 artisans all over the world, in Afghanistan and India. And she's branching out to Peru. So they actually contacted me to help with just the logistics of working in a developing country like Peru. And then I also, she has a brand extension called Woven Women, which I think is how Glenn has found me. And it's more of a women's group with people in the industry of fashion, and a bunch of other things. So we connect every week or so, and we have these really enlightening conversations like the one that we're having today. Yes, I will be in Peru next year. I am here until June of 2026, so about one more year. And yes, we can definitely connect. I'll share my personal contact so that Glenys can share it with you all.
Thank you so much. That was so impressive, the story that you share with us. And yeah, I will be there like for maybe, I don't know yet, but for a master degree thesis on the ground. So yeah, I will be based in Lima, and then I will go to field monitoring visit in the amateur. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, hopefully we get to meet.
I can just hop in. Thank you for your question, Mara. So I can also send what I'm saying now, but for me as a consumer, 2-3 organizations that make it easier for you to like see which people do good and do bad. Good on You is the first one. It's an Australian. They engaged consumers in checking what the brands disclose publicly. So basically, like, are they giving fair wages when they're due? Are they actually investing in materials and all these things? And they add a rating to that brand. So then you can search on all these different types of brands and their work, and then they benchmark based on their criteria. Another is B Corp, which is also an assessment of how a corporation is moving and doing work. And then there is Fashion Revolution, which every year do an assessment on, again, how brands are disclosing things, and they have a thing called Fashion Transparency Index, or FTI. Yeah, perhaps you have that also, Jerome. But they have an assessment of like hundreds of brands, and then, not surprisingly, all the big brands struggling on transparency because that's an issue. But if we hold them accountable, it helps. So I would advise to look into those three because that's what I do when I consume also.
Thank you so much. I will definitely
Thanks
check
for
them. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just pop in one last thing. There's also the shoe brand. I feel like we also like forget about the impact of shoes, but there's a shoe brand called Teely, Thaely, and they make sneakers. They're B Corp certified, and their entire shoe is made from recycled material. And they do a lot of work making sure that the workers that create them are taken care of, and they're just an overall amazing brand. I can put that in the chat as well. And I also wanted to, I always plug secondhand shopping. So there's this software called Benny. And one of the co-founders actually graduated from my program, but it's basically like a web browser plugin that you can download, and it's kind of similar to Honey, if you know what that is, where if you're shopping online, it'll show you like coupons for wherever you're shopping. But this software, Benny, it'll show places to shop secondhand based on like what you're online shopping. So if you're like on a Nike website, it'll show like another place you can buy similar shoe or the same shoe for secondhand, which is really cool. So I'll just plug those two things.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for all your answers.
Hello. My name is Julia. I'm from Italy as well. And I really wanted to thank you all for being here and for everything you said, because it is true that we do not speak enough about fast fashion. So really thank you. I had 2 questions for all of you. The first one is if you think there could be more sustainable ways to deal with the fashion waste, especially if every country were to be held accountable for their own waste. And so if every country were to hold their own waste within their borders, how would we actually sustainably deal with the amount of waste that we would have? And the second one is probably more specific for Sofie, as it's for the EU. I was wondering, because we talked a lot about storytelling, I do acknowledge that the EU does not have a lot of legislation on fast fashion because of the whole idea of growth, but at the same time, there's also a strong narrative on sustainability. So I was more curious about how fast fashion works in the EU. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Julia. For me, with EPR, in each country, like it's a struggle because EU isn't like an overarching government leadership. So EU is a unicorn in itself in its mandate. But I just, a couple of weeks ago, I saw a project, a 4-year project that I think has quite a lot of money behind it. It's called Circulatex. And it's a collaboration between 10 EU member states to like collectively fix EPR with its, regional boundaries, but acknowledging that few countries in EU are doing more work on the sorting and taking care of textiles than others. So Circulatex, I think, is a good resource to plug into. And on EU and sustainability, I just think it's important to be an active citizen, to actually support and follow the advocates that are in the members of the European Parliament, and push them and just engage as a citizen, because I think that really moves what the lawmakers are saying and care about, and also plugging into the companies that do engage with it, because in the fashion space there are quite a few. We can also set up a separate call, Julia, if you'd like, because I think about this too many hours of the day. But advocacy organizations, people interpreting policy, being the bridge between business and lawmakers in this new space. So it's you can really just explore the more you look into it. But I would gladly hop on a call after if you'd like, and we can chat about Europe and geek out fully.
Just on the waste front, the truth of the matter is nowhere in the EU can deal with the waste if it stayed there. Like all the communities and economies in Accra have had like 60 years of experience to grow capacity, to grow skill, to grow labor, everything. And like we are ready for the waste. We just don't have any support from anywhere else in the world. So we're dealing with people who have the littlest amounts of money, littlest amount of privilege, littlest amount of support doing all of this work. But the truth is they can do this work better than anywhere else in the world because they've had 60 years to grow that skill, to grow that precision, and to grow that capacity. So for us, it's not about closing the borders, because we're also aware of the fact that there is a whole economy built around all of these clothes coming to Accra. What we're saying is that all of these people should be paid fairly for the labor they're doing on behalf of the rest of the world. So it's not about closing borders. It's about making sure that when the waste crosses the border, it crosses with money, it crosses with infrastructural support, and it crosses with socioeconomic support. Yeah.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a current undergrad student. I'm from New York, studying political science. So I just had a question for you guys about specifically Gen Z and younger generations and your feelings and opinions about sort of their part in fast fashion. So specifically, like obviously I'm a part of Gen Z. We're sort of touted as the most ecologically conscious generation, but fast fashion is rising, and specifically due to our generation, it seems like. Personally, I see a lot of people who would call themselves environmentally friendly, but are very happy to buy from websites as long as it has the word like sustainability slapped on it, regardless of whether that's sort of empty language in reality. So I'm just kind of curious about what you guys think. Do you see like any hope or change in Gen Z in terms of getting our words to sort of fit with our buying habits?
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. A lot of I used to be in college and I had a lot of roommates that were environmental activists and used to like go to climate strikes and everything, but didn't like buy clothes. I think the general sentiment that I've seen from Gen Z is that like they don't feel like it should be their job to like also like push for these things in language, because it's so hard to go to a website, do the work, and like if you see her out there like doing like fair wages for people and everything like that. I feel like they really want us to like push on the systemic side, because I feel like inherently fashion industry is a systemic problem. I think a lot of people are just feeling the rise in inflation, are just like, well, where can I save? And like the easiest way you can save is probably like buying something that's cheaper and not thinking about it and kind of holding your nose. But yeah, I would kind of say like I don't think it's a personal flaw, but it's a reflection of the state of the system, I would say. But happy to have anyone jump in as well. So
I love this question. Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks, Sophie. So I have a lot of hope and faith in Gen Z. Like I really do. Also just to like give like more context, I'm 26, so I'm like right on the cusp of like millennial Gen Z. So I'm like hovering somewhere in the middle. But personally, I've learned a lot, I think, from the content that Gen Z creates. Like I've learned so much about organic cotton and just like sustainable farming. And I feel like the visuals of the actual mass and waste of the fashion industry is visible because of Gen Z a lot of times, or because of influencers in the fashion industry. So like I really do have a lot of hope. I do struggle with the reality that a lot of times people aren't fact checked. Well, never. They're really not fact checked. Like you can just publish something and publish it. Like whether it's true or not is a mystery until you get into the comments, or until someone else says like, "Hey, that's not necessarily true." So I think what really needs focus, and I don't have a solution for it, but is the responsibility that comes with sharing a message and just making sure that the information is factual. So that's always something that like I take on that responsibility with the artisans that I work with. Like even if it's spelling something in the indigenous language correctly, like I make sure to Google it before I type it. Like I'm like, I just want to make sure everything is accurate. But to just broadly answer your question, yes, I have hope. I just also am hopeful that the people who choose to share these messages do it, with all the right information.
Yeah, just hopping in, Katie. It's important to also note that again, fast fashion is driven by social media platforms, which Gen Z, like we're digitally fluent, but that comes with good and bad things, right? So even in my fashion advocacy work, Shein is the largest ad driver for Meta. Like they buy attention. That's what they do, and that's how we're like taught to consume, and that's where our mind should be. But I think it's important to also note that there are organizations that counter this narrative. So if you haven't heard of them already, they're called Remake, and they're a really big global organization of advocates, and they have great campaigns, and they're really like a grassroots kind of community, and their social media presence is incredible. So look at them and follow them and engage with them. But I also think just be kind with your attention span. That's what I try to tell myself in the space, to like match my own actions with my words and ethics, because you're drawn in to not think about that with social media. But we also have a brain and agency. So yeah.
Yes, just to add on, like you said, Jerome, Gen Z, like we're pretty broke and the world is going through a lot right now. And so I understand the band-aid that is fast fashion, the dopamine hit you get when you get a new pair of jeans and all of that. So like Sofie said, I do think we need to be kinder to ourselves. But at the same time, like I'm not really looking at 5, 10 years. Like I know Gen Z is going to go through it, and I'm really hoping that there's going to be an economic bubble that bursts and gives everyone the comfort that we're getting from fast fashion. But the thing is, with Gen Z, what I'm seeing is that we're changing our relationship with clothes in a way that I'm really hopeful that we're going to see the downstream effect in like the next maybe 20, 30 years, because we've all been sort of sleepwalking through the fashion industry for the last 100 years, or I guess maybe even sooner. I mean, maybe even earlier, Industrial Revolution and all of that. And I'm really, really hopeful that it's our generation that starts waking up in a way that we might not see it now. We might keep buying Shein hauls for like the next 5 years, but I'm really hoping that in 25 years, there would have been enough of the cultural and generational cultural shift that the whole narrative has changed. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys.
Hi, my name is Rhoda. I am a senior. I'm a senior. First, thank you for joining us during your busy day and despite the time zone difference. Thank you so much. I have just like 3 quick questions. First is, who should be the most responsible held for the harms of the fast fashion? Like the brands, the consumers like me, or the government? Who do you think should be like the most responsibility should be held?
I can speak to that a bit. Coming from nonprofit spaces, I think the government has an outdue responsibility to make sure that these standards are upheld because it's so hard for anyone like Jimena, like the work that she was saying, like she has to like fact check it and like there's no government body that like says like what those has a definition for it. But I think yeah, it'd be really great for the government to really step up in these ways.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel, and oh, sorry.
you go, I'll go after.
Sorry, yeah, my computer's overheating, so everything's like delayed. Um, yeah, just hopping off of what Jerome said, I feel like it depends on who you speak to. I also agree that it should be the government, but I mean, we're also consumers are the ones buying it, so it could be like depending on who you speak to, but also we were born into a capitalistic society, so we're kind of just doing what we're taught. But I think it's up to us to work against it and unlearn what we've been taught. You just have pretty much have a complete paradigm shift away from it. So I guess the most should be government, but we also have a responsibility as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so similar to that, I was just going to say that like yes, governments and businesses like they have power, they have money, they have resources. But I really truly believe and I have faith in this that like you have all the power you need to start making change as an individual. And I was trying to think of like, okay, like what does a world look like? A world in which everyone knows about sustainable fashion and no one wants to buy fast fashion because they feel guilty or icky after they contribute to that. And I mean, I was thinking just, I don't know if like we can relate these two things, but like the change of perspective on cigarettes, like, I don't know how many years ago, I don't know the exact dates, but people thought they were healthy and like it was so trendy and the marketing was everywhere. And it's like, okay, you have a cigarette and you look very classy and elegant. And like now everyone knows cigarettes are bad for you. And now, at least in certain countries, like cigarettes have a picture of the damage they can do to your body. So like look at that shift of something from elegance and class to now full harm for your entire system. And so I really do have that faith that the fashion industry could change that dramatically if people knew the effects and if I don't know if like fashion brands were forced to put a picture of all of their waste on their website or something like that. And it just starts with the individual. And I know that cost is a barrier for some people. I know before I had a full-time job and when I was in college, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go to Zara because that's what I can afford. And now that I have a little bit more means, like I'm like, no, I'm gonna make these conscious decisions and I'm not going to contribute to that cause that I don't believe in. So yes, like I mentioned in the beginning, like government and business, they have power, but I think we as individuals have choice.
Yeah. Well, in continuation that question, is my second question where countries like Bangladesh and India and Pakistan, like they have cheap labors so that like countries like USA and UK can make the best use of it. So how much do you think the government is going to like accept these policies, or even like how much do you think they press on this issue? Because despite both the parties will be affected by this.
Yeah, from some of the work that we've been doing in the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, we had a few meetings with a lot of the East and South Asian countries, and a lot of the solutions that we came to the conclusion of was the low wages is the impetus for why companies go and enter this neo-colonialist framework, and it's like having that as a baseline from the UN's perspective to create a standard for wage minimums across the globe, and to have that be a part of how we make sustainability, because if they're already spending so much money on labor, they have to start allocating and acting as if they are a part of a better world that they want to do. But I think a lot of also the conversation is because of free market conversations that we've seen across like NAFTA and other organizations. We've seen that they are continuing to, companies are pushing for lower wages and they're pushing for these things. So as an active kind of fight against it, because if we do start having conversations in good faith around companies raising their wages and raising sustainability standards, it's not the countries themselves, but it's the countries on behalf of the lobbying that's been done, the corruption that's in these systems that prevents such progress. So it's on behalf of us to put pressure on companies to say, hey, we saw that you gave millions of dollars to this government to stop wage labor. Let's call them out on it, and use social media for that way to get companies to get out of the way of progress, and that's what I've seen.
Okay. I just have one more question. So the last is, I know like fast fashion has been an issue recently, and how much do you think you'll go back to the traditional way of like hand me down and like borrowing it from other people? Like how much do you think from the past we can bring to the present? And do you think it has not changed, or it has been like a growing issue?
Perhaps I can help in there. Thank you for your questions, Rhoda. For me, I love hand-me-downs. Like, perhaps I'm like atypical, but I borrow clothes from my friends. I give clothes to my friends. Like, that is such an attachment thing to me. So I think I'm perhaps like past the lure of fast fashion, because like I need to see it. I need to get the connection to it, to like the people I love, that I care about. And it's so much, it makes me so much more happy.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps if you have an internal inspection of like what items make me happy or like have good feelings, and then I don't think that's going to be the attachment of an impulse buy from a website. Perhaps it
Yeah.
is, but coin toss, probably not. So just have that introspection yourself, and then talk with your closest friends and like borrow from each other, because that's such a nice dynamic way of like consuming. You just shift because you still get the newness, but it's something that's very precious and dear to you. So perhaps you should start your own trend, Rhoda. Clothing circle.
I guess for us it's a little different because colonialism. So if we go back far enough, we're dealing with questions of like this new modesty culture that's come up, or like professionalism. Because I don't know that we would be able to dress the way we used to dress to an office setting and still be respected the same way, just because of how messed up everything is. So for those of us, I guess, in this weird space of, we do want to go back and reclaim all the beautiful things of our culture, but we just understand that this new world that has been built isn't really accepting of that. And so there's so much that has to be done there before we can go. But I don't know if you guys follow the Met Gala and the whole Black Dandy exhibit and all of that. That's just something that kept going through my head, going through all the beautiful designs, is that while it is beautiful, it's just a constant reminder that as colonial subjects, our new identity in this new world still has to combine all of these messed up systems and capitalist structures and everything with what we hold dear and what we hold beautiful. So it's not so much about going back, because we can't really go back. The world isn't really designed for us to go back, but just trying to figure out what this new normal is for us in this new space. And for Ghana, we have such a big upcycling culture because we've gotten so much textile waste for so many decades. So it's about making quirky, like somewhat outlandish pieces from old ties and old denim and all of that, or even more conservative ones. But just that culture that clothing doesn't have to become waste. It can be something beautiful again if you just do a few new stitches or like cut it up and add it to another thing. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, I think we are frozen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Maybe turn. Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Could you probably turn your camera off and turn it back on?
Does it work now?
Yes, we're all good.
Hello, my name is Justin. I'm a Korean American. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. My question is related to what Katia, is that how to pronounce your name? I'm sorry. Was talking about regarding the relationship of clothing waste between the global north and south. So, I mean, yeah, I see how the global south in some ways is doing the global north a favor by taking all of this clothing waste. If that's the case, I was wondering what's preventing the current global south countries setting conditions, for instance, limiting the amount of waste that comes in, which might incentivize corporations to produce less, or the things you mentioned, such as bringing in proper infrastructure to manage those wastes, etc.
So on that front, it would be great if we lived in a world where the clothes didn't come here, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with a lot of different countries that are at different places socioeconomically. So like we're like even comparing Ghana to our neighbors who are getting the same waste. We have just different geopolitical relationships with the global north. You know, we have French colonies, British colonies, and all of that, that we're not at a point where we can make a united and coordinated enough effort to say no more. Because if Ghana just shuts its doors, it's just going to go to another global south with like larger volumes. And then the entire market in Ghana collapses for nothing. And then that makes room for, Shein and Temu and other manufacturers to just flood the same markets with brand new cheap clothes because the markets still exist. And like for a system that's built over decades, if not centuries, it's not an easy fix, because if you just shift too quickly in one direction, it's going to be a domino effect that just collapses economies in other ways. So I guess for us, it's more of a transition. We do want to transition out of this world, like where we're at the bottom of this hierarchy so they can just dump all of our clothes. But it's about coordination, it's about uniting all of these markets. But it's also, I guess, about raising these communities socioeconomically to the point where they can have these arguments and negotiations with the global north. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with 60-year-old women, some of whom didn't necessarily go to school, or some of whom were still born at a time where they had British governors and British policemen and all of that. So their relationship with the global north is it's a very specific one that it'll take just so many years to correct, that we can't just do quick fixes like closing the borders, because that's just going to have so many ripple effects that we're not ready for. Yeah.
So then in that case, sorry if I ask a follow-up. What do you think are the steps that the global south can take if we can't do any extreme measures like closing the border? Because there must be something that can be done if it's true that this is a relationship where both parties are benefiting or being harmed in some way and both have something to lose.
I guess ultimately it comes down to who's at the negotiating table. Right now, like nobody from the market is. So it comes down to all of that, all of us that do have the privilege. So like those of us who went to colleges in the US, or even like people who aren't from Ghana who are cognizant of these problems, should just be the ones at the negotiating table pointing them out. Because if nobody's fighting for these women in the market, they're just going to keep being exploited and not even know that they're being exploited. So for us, that's a big step. But also, and I know we've said so much about EPR, but that really is a big part for us, because we do have to invest in these communities that have been directly affected. Because if there's no funding going there, they're not going to be in the position where they can fight for themselves. They're already doing all of this work. All we need to do is bring it to the limelight and change the conversation. So when we are negotiating for a fair pay and a fair structure and all of that, they're able to join the conversation themselves. Yeah. There's no easy answer to that, so I hope that's good enough.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add on there that there was conversations between the US and Rwanda, and also in Kenya as well, and Tanzania, that they were going to ban their the reduce of secondhand clothing, and they, as a result, Global North denied them access from the AGOA. And I think that is something that is pretty powerful, that like if Rwanda said that, oh, we're going to limit the sale of these, and they take that away, then it comes from the global north to say, hey, we can allow continual colonial relationships. So if we're from global north countries, make sure that whenever, like, being vigilant in the news, and then also being a part of organizations like Sofie and Jimena were talking about, like that they're leading these charges to be a part of it, raise your voice so we don't continue these relationships. Thank you for your questions. A really good question as well.
You.
I think that's about it with the questions. Do we have any final thoughts?
I'll just say that there's a lot of amazing questions from the interns, and it makes me happy to know that you're all thinking about these things to that degree. So just keep going and keep questioning things and keep learning and follow what drives a fire in your belly. And I know there's a lot of I don't know if everyone here is even interested in doing fast fashion advocacy or not, I mean, against advocacy in their career, but it can be a rabbit hole. There's a lot of different, problems to address, but don't give up, don't lose hope. There's a community of people doing the same work. So
Yeah, I just wanted to shed light on like the power of the collective. And this is the first time that I've really sat in a call like this. Usually my calls are more field-based work and more on the ground. This is the first time that I've like touched on these topics of like big business, big corporation, government, like rules, whatnot. And like I feel so inspired. And I also feel like we're all in like the same corner. So I think that it's just important to note like the power of coming together and having these conversations. And if you do want to eventually like work in fashion or work in one of these things, I mean, I can just share I started just by expressing my interest. Like I had no fashion background. And here I am 1 year later, like working with a brand based in Amsterdam who's coming to Peru to launch a product extension. And I just think that that's like, you just have to raise your hand and be like, yes, I want to do this. So that's just my little token of advice for anyone who wants to start if they are coming from zero background.
Yeah, just adding on to that, and then I think Katia will round us off beautifully. But I think one common denominator for me, at least, is that you are like taught that you don't have agency or that you cannot decide because these things seem too big for you to tackle yourself. And I think just do some introspection of reaching out to people that you think do great work. I mean, we're all here as resources now and points of contact if you want to just have a 15-minute chat about anything. Like it's really like the power of networks and showing up because even in the New York primaries, we had such a huge grassroots movement in that space and that moves things. But just you have power and it's like in the small meetings that you didn't think would change anything and then you have that conversation and then it's snowballed from there. So just stay curious. I mean, you're at a great internship, so I think you're going to grow into beautiful things from there. That's all I'll leave for now.
I guess mine is just, I think we just need to love clothes again. Human beings are a kooky, like weird little species, and we used to make these colorful garments that made us feel good and that helped us express ourselves, but we've just allowed capitalism and consumerism to morph it into this giant machinery that's just telling us you need 5 black t-shirts that all look the same but are a slightly different shade of black. And yeah, if we just start loving clothes more and buying clothes because they're fun and they make us feel good, not because they're $5, you'll realize you buy less clothes because you're buying clothes that you actually love and not clothes that are just convenient for you. So I guess for me, like one little step that's helped me was last year I just said no more new clothes and just I would only buy a piece if it really spoke to me and like really made me feel good. And I realized at the end of the year, I had all of these amazing clothes that I genuinely loved and enjoyed wearing. And I spent a lot less money on clothes. And I didn't feel any less stressed. I didn't feel like I was lacking something. But then it really was a transformative year for me in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that from this conversation, from these conversations I've had over the past year, in light of the tone of the moment, I would encourage everyone to remain within your values. I feel like professionalism leads to us oftentimes to self-moderate ourselves and to feel like we can't speak. But oftentimes silence in these systems, these moments leads to violence and leads to continuation of injustice. And if you know that anytime you walk into a room, you put on a suit, but you can still lead people to question their values by saying, hey, the lecturer who's teaching that lesson, talk about things that you feel like are inconsistent or in contradiction, and be unafraid to poke at that status quo. Because for myself, I got involved because my science teacher was like, there's a 5-person event to go to, led to an internship, and led to continually engaging in things. And that was just because of asking antagonistic questions to get people to think outside the box. So whenever you're in a space, even outside of the spaces like this, where everyone's really committed to changing the world for the better, and when you're in spaces that aren't like this, and maybe you're the only person, know that you have a movement behind you. When Greta Thunberg led 10 million people around the world, she didn't know that she was going to do that. She just thought she'd be 10 people, but it was the entire world that's behind her. So know that when you speak for the majority of people that want to see the world change, and be unafraid in that.
Oh, we have one last question.
Have you ever thought of putting a symbol on this that I support blank, and that you just get to download a symbol and it's on your site or it's on your whenever, and it becomes significant that you support only wearing and buying this kind of clothing, so that everybody can just, everybody in the room would download it and put it on their site, and then it's meaningful, and then before you know it, there's millions and millions of people who are saying, I support this, and you know it because you know the symbol, and somebody comes up with it, this group comes up with it. And then you start a movement. You say, if you support this, just download this symbol, and it becomes something that gets news and gets seen and gets reported on, and before you know it, there's 100 million people that are all saying, we only buy blank and we support these companies, and you list them. It doesn't seem difficult to do with a group of committed people, even in this room.
Could you all hear that? Any thoughts?
The people on that screen, the people in this room could say, we're starting this, come up with a symbol. You have a meeting, come up with a symbol. It's a green circle with a who knows what on it. And before you know it, you've got something, and it's a worldwide movement. It gets news and it gets seen, and you've made a difference. Right here, you'd have another 50 people. I don't know, I could send it out. Everybody sends their list, and before you know it, it's viral, and you've got something, and then you've got a movement, and it's known.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of speaks to kind of what we were talking about earlier with Gen Z. Just like the power we have with social media and being able to make these movements, specifically on TikTok and Instagram. I feel like there's something there that has incredible power that I think I'm just kind of waiting for somebody to do it because I'm not a TikToker, but just like some paradigm shift to make buying less cool, essentially, or buying better fabric, something like that, just making it so that that emotional connection in our brains translates to the same emotional connection that buying something like from Pretty Little Thing or something like that has. I think there's a lot of work that can be done thinking about the psychology of humans and how to shift that, and that can totally go hand in hand with like creating a movement using social media, for example.
Well, I say this because I happen to have a friend who couldn't be here today, but she started the first. She was a socialite and a fashionista and everything else that you can imagine. And she started the first all green line. This is, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 30 years ago. And it didn't go anywhere, so to speak, because the timing wasn't the way it is now. It's a pretty fertile environment. And you people do represent a huge buying power. You represent a huge future buying power too. And if you said we only support companies that do this, I think that you might see fashion houses looking at certainly celebrities also. Start putting pressure on celebrities to walk the red carpets, and they're wearing fashion that's just as beautiful as everybody else, but they're all materials that were made, according to standards. You've got something, and it's newsworthy.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you all. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add on that. I'm currently in the works on something that's around like a symbol that's coming up the next year. So I'll be in touch with them, or I'll be in touch with Simple Understanding and share that with you all as it comes out.
You don't have to wait for somebody else to do it. That's all I'm going to tell you. If you want to do it, this group, I'm sitting here watching all, I'm going, wow, this could be something. You're very eloquent, you speak, your mind, you're very clear on what your mission is, and there's no reason to wait for somebody else to do it. Grassroots is even better.
Well, thank you all for your insights and your encouraging words of empowerment. We'll try to compile all the amazing resources that you mentioned on our website for all the audiences. And thank you for all the good questions to our interns, and thank you for all the great answers. And I think we're on time so far. That's it. Thank you.